Hello guys, and welcome to RTD's Garage. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to install and redo the fuel system on the Stihl BG85. I recommend that everybody gets one of these $5 to $10 screwdriver sets. They typically come with a bunch of various sockets and driver heads. Stihl typically uses 8mm, so that's what I'm going to be having here on this driver here, as well as a ratchet with an extension just in case. Depends on how tight the nuts are on there, as well as another separate flathead just for prying, as well as a T27 Torx and a rubber hammer. You never know when you might have to get those stubborn parts off of there. The first thing you want to do if you're having a no start issue is check your fuel system. 9 times out of 10 that is your problem. This particular example has high compression, as I just showed. So the first thing we want to do is take this air filter off of there. You should be able to push these clips in and pull this housing off. Once this housing is removed, next take your air filter off. I'd recommend to go behind this flap right here. Makes it easiest to pull off. Next, what you're going to notice is that there are 2 8mm nuts holding on this carb assembly. So this is where we take the 8mm and take those right off. Nice. Once those 2 nuts are removed, the next step is to take this assembly off, as well as your metal plate. Make sure to take note that you have a gasket that goes between this plastic choke housing and another gasket that goes between this metal plate and the carburetor itself. Now I know some of you might be wondering, well, no wonder it didn't start. You didn't have the fuel system nor the primer bulb hooked up. I took those off prior to my first disassembly of this, and I've already determined that the carburetor was more or less just worth replacing. And another reason why I took this fuel line off of there, even though it looks like it's in okay shape, is due to, if you look there, there's a crack in that line, and over time that could cause air leaks, it could cause it to fall off easier, and a whole host of other problems that would make you think something else is wrong with the machine. Once you've disassembled the machine this far, next you want to take off this top housing. There should be 4 T27 bolts to take off in order to get half of this throttle handle off. Next, this part is a bit tricky, but I'd recommend taking your flathead and prying around until this housing fully comes off. There is a throttle linkage that runs from the carburetor up to here, is the reason why we're taking this throttle handle off to begin with. So be very mindful of that. Watch out for that throttle lever whenever you're trying to take this off. And there we go. Next, you'll see where this linkage is attached, and you'll want to go ahead and pull that out. By detaching this throttle lever, you're allowing the carburetor to be able to slide fully off without getting all bent and conjoined up in here. That's just the way they design these old BG85s. Once you have the carburetor removed off of these studs, I'd recommend leaving the lever in the same spot that it was, like so. And here I have the new kit. Now, these new kits come with a lot of different items, one of them being a new spark plug. What I would recommend is if your machine already has NGK factory plug, then I would either leave that if it's fairly new, if the machine isn't that old, or replacing it with the same NGK plug. These are good to keep for backups. Here we have our new air filter, new fuel lines, new filter, and most importantly, our brand new carburetor. Some might argue that these Zamas are the preferable option to keep on the machine, but what I've found is that the aftermarkets work just as well, maybe even better. This particular Stihl FS56 RC has had the same aftermarket carb on it for almost 5 years now, and we've never had one issue with it. At this point, you would need to remove your fuel lines and filter, which I've already done with this flathead. The next step after removing the lines is going to be reassembling everything. Next, you can install your new fuel filter onto the new lines. And then simply allow the filter to drop in and install the lines. Once you have your fuel lines fully seated along the gas tank, we can now reinstall the carburetor. Remember, when installing the carburetor, the short crinkly line goes on the lower stem. The longer return line goes on the top stem. Before installing the carburetor onto the studs, make sure your old gasket is off and your new gasket goes on. Make sure your impulse line is correctly aligned with the gasket, as well as attaching your throttle lever onto the carburetor and running it underneath this piece here. Once you've fitted the carburetor on there properly, you can now take this metal lever and fit it into the plastic lever. The rest of the process is pretty straightforward here. All we have to do is install our outer gasket, install the metal plate, the choke assembly, the two nuts that go on the housing. And for these, I would recommend starting them by hand, since they can prove difficult to be able to pull out of the intakes, and sometimes they like to move in and out. Like so. If you had problems getting these started by hand, I would even recommend taking your flathead and getting on one of the grooves of the stud and pulling it out a little bit to help you get it started. The new air filter. And lastly, the air filter cover. Sometimes these aftermarket covers can be bigger than the original, so this is where it might be handy to give this a couple taps in. And lastly, we can install this outer throttle handle assembly. Once again, the hammer might be useful here. The thing I would recommend is take any of your old parts and put them alongside your new parts box and store them out of the way. Nice, we just redid the entire fuel system on this Stihl BG85. So now let's see if she'll run. Fresh gas is always important whenever doing these carb rebuilds, because it's likely, if you're doing a carb rebuild, that the old fuel or the fuel that may be in it from sitting from years ago may have been the cause of the carburetor's condition. And now that the fresh fuel is in, let's see if she'll run. Let's see what she's got. She's primed up. Throttle lever all the way back. Give her some choke. If you guys enjoy content like this, please consider subscribing. Whereas in the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to tune a carburetor on a small engine. The way I'll be tuning this carburetor will typically apply to any small engine. Some will vary depending on their age and their make of the carburetor. But overall, it's a pretty straightforward process. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next time on RTD's Garage.